Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, no matter what time of the day you're joining us. I'd like to welcome you to today's broadcast of the Fireplace Show. And what is the Fireplace Show? It is a show that we put on and we broadcast from the CVC Success Group studio here in Concord, North Carolina. And the purpose and the mission of our show is to share with consumers helpful information about their fireplaces, their wood stoves, their gas logs, and everything else. So today I got a really special guest on with me. And between the two of us, so you'll know, you're looking at a total of 83 years of experience in the chimney and fireplace industry. My guest has a few more years than I do. So anyway, Tom, appreciate you being on. How you doing today, brother?
Couldn't be any better, Jerry. Thanks for having me on today.
Hey, I appreciate you taking some time out of your busy schedule. So, what we're going to do is we're going to play our intro music. We'll be right back. So, don't go nowhere. We'll be right back and we'll be sharing information. And we'll also take questions from the audience during our broadcast today. So, appreciate you being here. Stick around with us. Hey, and welcome back with us. So here it is. We're in October of the year 2021. And Tom, I don't know about where you live, but right now I can feel fall coming in. It's cool at night. The mornings are crisp. The mornings are clear. So, Tom, you're out there in Fairfield, Iowa, the Heartland of America, where we grow a lot of corn, a lot of agriculture. Is fall already appearing there in Fairfield, Iowa with you, Mother?
Yes, Jerry, the leaves are changing, but more importantly, we can see lights at night all over across the state where combines are running 24/7, either combining corn and beans. So the roads are jam-packed with tractor trailers full of grain and people out in the field harvesting them all up. So it's a busy time of the year out here.
It certainly is. And like I said, that's what we call the heartland of America, because when you get out there, you see miles and miles and miles of cornfields, and you see soybeans, you see all kinds of things, because you're basically a part of the country that produces a lot of food and you're transporting it out of there right now. But anyway, our show today is all about, hey, it's getting cooler weather. So what does that mean? Consumers across America are firing up their fireplaces, they're firing up their wood stoves, their gas logs, their gas fireplaces, no matter what that choice of hearth appliance is. So what we wanted to do was come on and share with you ideas, and we also want to take your questions today. Feel free to enter them in through the comment bar if you have any questions about your fireplace. We're going to try to cover some basic knowledge for you to help you make your fireplace more enjoyable, your wood stove. If you're looking for heat, you're simply looking for the romance of the fire, a nice relaxing evening in front of the fire, enjoying a glass of wine, a cup of coffee, or whatever your choice is. So, Tom, if memory serves me correct, I gave our combined years of experience as 83 years between yourself and myself. And we've seen a lot of changes in this industry over those combined 83 years. I believe you started in the year 1978. And there weren't a lot of chimney sweeps at that time, were there, Tom?
No, there was not.
There was not. And I've done a previous broadcast with Tom, because one of the things about Tom and myself, we are both instructors to the chimney and the fireplace and the hearth industry. We've taught classes together. We've taught classes separately for quite a few years. And we are two guys that members of the industry listen to a lot, and we help take them and become more professionally proficient, better able to communicate, better able to document their findings and how they share that with the client. So, Tom, you invented a device that basically revolutionized the chimney inspection industry. What is that device? What does it do in a chimney? Why does a chimney sweep have this device? Because what it's called is, it's an interior chimney video inspection device. And you pretty well have branded this as a chim scan that people actually call this. So when did you do this, and what was your thinking, and why do chimney sweeps need this to do a great inspection of the fireplace and the chimney system?
It started back in 1983, Jerry, when I was out sweeping back in Northeast Pennsylvania. And I was having continually run across situations where I was trying to explain to customers that there's issues inside the fireplace, the wood stove, chimneys, furnace, boilers, whatever they were burning on that chimney. And it was just really tough to explain that to them. So as time went on, by I think late 1983, I had created my own inspection system, and from there, we started to use it within the field. I was able to show people the defects and the devils in the details type thing. So we were able to show customers, tell them, explain to them why they were having conditions. And a lot of the situations, most chimneys at the time just seemed to appear to be okay from looking from top and bottom. But once you get inside and you start looking at it 4 inches away, we began to realize that chimneys were not as we all thought they should be. And there's a lot of gaps and openings, and creosote and soot were all leaking in different areas, and crack liners, and we just went on and on and on. But so we were able to, revolutionize the industry by the ability to be able to show this to the customers and get chimneys to a place where they actually are supposed to do what they're supposed to do, exhaust all the combustible products.
Right. And, I think I first met you, it was probably in the year 1984, might have been 1985, but you actually had that camera in a booth with some friends of yours by the Sleepy Hollow Chimney Sweep Supply. And I remember walking through, and there was a TV camera showing me inside of the stainless steel lineup up there. So that was when you and I first met. We developed a really good bond of friendship over the years. What year was that, Tom? Do you remember?
It was in 1984 was when we opened up, when we had the product. It was at Washington, D.C. where we did it. And then after that, I was in the Sleepy Hollow's booth and other booths and stuff, and with Copperfield later in 85 and 86 and 87. So, we were, hold on a second. Josh, kill the air compressor. Air compressor, turn it off. Thank you. Sorry about that, guys.
It's okay, man. I was wondering, it's like, we got a lot of racket there. I hope you could hear because I could. So anyway.
Thank you.
Tom, as we go into this, like I said, the whole intent is to share with consumers today about what they need to spot on their chimneys and on their fireplaces in order to be safe and to have effective and efficient systems. And one of the things also I didn't bring up, Tom, but you've actually been a featured guest on a television show by the name of This Old House. How many times were you on This Old House?
I believe my equipment was on 4 times. I was on for 3.
Okay, so you were on for 3. But in this, what you did is you went to homes, and what you would do was you were walking around and showing problems on the outside of a chimney that was there at a house, and then went more in-depth inspections. But that's kind of where I want to key a lot of this in today, is what can consumers see on their chimneys that can alert them that there are issues, or on the fireplace front. We're going to talk about that today, because one of the things is being able to spot these issues. We're also going to tell you who to go to today to get expert opinions on what the conditions are and how you can locate a good technician to do this for you, as far of what's going on. But right now, we also have to remember there's a group called the National Fire Protection Association, and that is short for, the short terminology is NFPA. And NFPA recommends that every chimney, every venting system be inspected on an annual basis. It doesn't say clean, it doesn't say sweep, but what it does say is inspected and then swept or cleaned as needed. Tom, why did NFPA have this recommendation that the chimney be checked once a year?
I think I would call it was set up as a protocol, Jerry, because the simple reason is that from year to year, especially when they're not used all the time, that animals, birds can get inside the chimney. Deterioration can happen. A lot of other, wear and tear is a real big issue where things can change within the system that may not allow it to do a total, or a complete exhaust of all the combustibles inside the chimney. So that's why 211 created that, just so that you have an opportunity to make sure inspect it, to make sure it's open and clear enough that you can go through the season without having any difficulties with it being able to exhaust.
Right. And not only do I work with training chimney sweeps and people in the hearth industry, I also work with the home inspection industry. I just completed a class last week in New York for training home inspectors on chimney inspections. And about 2 weeks before that, I was in Las Vegas. And I've actually got one coming up in a couple of weeks out in your neck of the woods in Omaha, Nebraska. But what we're doing here is sharing the things so home inspectors become more astute in spotting the issues. But Tom, here's the situation. Tom Urban is a chimney sweep at this moment as we're talking about this. And you get called to look at a chimney to do the inspection. Well, as you pull your truck up in the house, there's a brick structure there that we call the chimney. And you and I are going to get out of that truck and we're going to start doing a preliminary review of what we're seeing on the outside of that chimney. And there's certain things that are going to detail us that this chimney probably has problems. So in your cursory preliminary examination, what are you looking for on the outside of a chimney? And folks, please listen in because these are the things that you're going to be able to see, and we want to help you be observant in these. So, Tom, what's the things you're looking for? And I may add a few things in that that I may look for. So, what's in your criteria? This is what I'm looking for as I take my preliminary view of this chimney.
I guess the first thing I wanted to look at, Jerry, whether it's brick or it's in a chase or whatever, make sure that it's the color. There's no difference in the color of the brickwork or the stonework. I want to make sure that that's all uniform. If it's not, it's telling me that we've got some water leakage that's leaching out of the chimney. The other thing I'm going to look at for too is if there's any white coating or whatever on the outside also, which lends me to believe that water has penetrated the chimney, has come through the brickwork or stonework in the form of efflorescence and has left us white crystals, mineral deposits on the outside. Other thing I'm going to look at is as the top. I'm going to see whether it has a cap, doesn't have a cap. I might even from the ground, I might be able to see the crown, which is the top masonry piece on the top of it, to see whether it's in place or not. I want to look down also at the brickwork itself or stone. Am I looking at missing mortar joints or areas between the stonework, whatever that mortar has fallen out? I want to look at the edges and the sides of it. Are they running, lateral, or do we have something where we got something bowing out or whatever that shouldn't be there? I'll look for clean out access if there is on the outside of it. Let's see. I'll also look where the gutters go. I want to see if the gutters are in a place where they're away from the chimney. Is there a wet spot around the outside? Is there a place that's got a hollow where water can collect next to the foundation? Let's see what else I would look for. Bed joints, head joints. Make sure that they're smooth and they're clean and are intact. I also want to look for any exterior cracking. I want to look at the top and bottom of the chimney up closely and see whether or not I've got this crack going through it in any way, a peculiarity that needs to be addressed or looked at. So that's probably about my top cursory things, Jerry, and probably you could add a few more to it.
Yeah, and the things I'd be looking for, I would be looking, you mentioned the crown, and what we're talking about in the chimney crown, that is the top of the chimney. And the Brick Institute of America recommends that every chimney have an overhanging crown so the water doesn't run down the chimney, rather it runs off the chimney. Now, another area that I'm going to look at is going to be, does the chimney get wider as it comes down? And you may have what we call exterior corbels or exterior shoulders that actually project out and create this more flat area on the sides. Now, these both are water entry pinpointed areas and areas where we could have a lot of damage to the chimney, because we want to share this. The number one deteriorating factor to a masonry chimney and also factory built chases, and Tom, I'm going to ask if you agree, is water entry and what we call the resultant freeze-thaw effect. Do you agree with my statement?
It's freeze-thaw is the real characters. If this in the masonry products that are out there. On the other side of the coin, Jerry, we have our prefabricated chimneys where we're going to have rot and deterioration or mold can be created because of water. So I'd probably have to, I definitely would agree with you that water is probably enemy number one when it comes to chimneys, providing, other situations. But just wear and tear issues, water is probably the biggest hazard and difficulties that chimneys have to withstand.
Yeah. And one of the things we both teach diagnostics classes and analysis classes. And one of the things that we teach technicians is, and you heard Tom say it, which is changes in the color or discoloration. Now, he talked about two different things here. One was where we see the chimney is darkened. And if the chimney is darkened, that's an indication of water being retained in the masonry. Now, Tom, if water can be retained in the masonry, what does this do to the inside of the chimney itself, which is usually lined with terracotta clay tiles. Think of like a flower pot. It's a very similar material with a mortar in between there. And many times someone may have not used the proper mortar. So if we have water entry into the chimney itself and it's retaining, what does this do to the joints, Tom?
There's a couple things, I guess, we only added that one to it, Jerry. Is not only once water can enter inside the chimney cavity itself, it does two things that chimneys don't do well with. It's wet and it's cold, and basically will reduce your draft because the chimney needs that much more heat to try to help continue the draw go up through the chimney. But as the chimneys are put together, if it's a masonry chimney and you have liners going inside the chimney, lots of times those joints take abuse from wear and tear, especially from water damage, where the expansion contraction of not only the heat but also the cold and the moisture on the outside, in a way, kind of attack the joints, and in some period of time, because the wrong mortar is used, they crack and they fall out.
Yeah. And Tom, one of the things that you came up some years ago that's a real telling way for people to be aware of what happens when the joints are gone is you came up and wrote an article or a brochure, I forget which it was, but you talked about comparing it to a drinking straw. And where if a straw has holes in it, and I've copied you many times on what you've come, because it's a very good way of doing it, where you can't pull the soft drink you're trying to drink, or your pop, or whatever you want to call it. I'm from the South. We call it a soft drink. You may call it a pop, or it could be iced tea. But when you got holes in that straw, well, see, the same thing happens in a chimney. So Tom, kind of explain that. If there's holes in between these joints where there's no mortar, what does that affect? What's the big problem with that?
I guess the first principle that goes along with chimneys, Jerry, is they don't work under positive pressure. They work under negative pressure. So this is somewhat the same thing as we use the analogy of the drinking straw. And if you were to poke holes in this drinking straw and try to suck on it, you have to work like 5 times harder to try to get your beverage up through the straw, because the holes are then allowing air in. This is the same principle that's happening within chimneys, is that the more holes that are in it, the more other excess air can come into the chimney, because it's under a negative pressure, like a very mini vacuum. Then it just dilutes the draft to the point where it just really doesn't work very well. So it has to work on heat to get it to move back up. But then if the chimney's cold, then basically everything all just comes to zero. And then your chimney doesn't draw. You might have smoking issues. You have leakage areas. You've got places where certain smoke now can leave the chimney liner itself and go inside the chimney, and the same thing with excess air coming into it. So it's a dynamic thing. It's, in other words, once you put something, Mother Nature hates a vacuum, and when you're in a chimney, you are really creating a vacuum. And if there's any holes and stuff, you dramatically reduce the drafting capabilities of the appliance.
Right. And that's one of the things, if you're a consumer and you have a chimney service technician, a chimney sweep, as we would call them, come out to your house, often they're going to take a camera that Tom may have made and lower into the chimney, and they're going to be able to see these from very close up. It may be an inch, could be 2 or 3 inches away. And actually, you can actually focus the camera through cracks at times, because the camera head will swivel and look in different directions depending on the model of camera that they're using, where you can see through these joints and actually see the outside of the chimney. So one of the things here is, and a lot of people aren't aware of this, but the reason that chimneys are lined is not so much for fire safety, rather it is to protect the fragile chimney walls from the corrosive effects of the combustion gases. So if these gases can leak through here and the liquids and the condensates get into it, what's going to happen is that's an acidic material. And if it gets against normal brick, excuse me, we're going to have premature deterioration where the chimney is going to fail prematurely, and probably we're going to have to do a rebuild at some point. Okay, so that's some of the problems of that particular problem there of what can happen. Now, Tom, also you talked about white stuff on the outside of the chimney, and that's called effervescence. So Tom, do you want to give what effervescence is and what's happening when you see this whitish residue, which can actually build up almost to a powder, because it's kind of like a crystalline buildup So what can this do? What's happening here? What is this white stuff that's coming out of this brick and depositing on the outside walls?
This is water that's been trapped inside the actual masonry material around the chimney, whether it's brick. Most of the times you'll see this in brick. You'll see it sometimes in stone too. It depends on, where you are in the stone that you're working with. But what's happened is water's become trapped in it, and after the period of time, the brick has absorbed some of that moisture, and the process is it keeps leaching its way outside of the chimney. And by the time that the moisture that's left has now been evaporated, the only things that are left are actually the minerals or the salts that are in the brick and the stone or block. So that is where, and that's a really good indicator that you see that the damage has been going on for quite some time, and as enough moisture has collected that the brick or block or masonry material has taken all it can take, the water's been evaporated, and what's left is this white powder.
Yep. Now, another thing, and we didn't mention this, either one of us, is we're looking for something we call spalling. And spalling is where the face of the brick itself actually is coming off. You may even find chips of brick or chunks of brick facing that's fallen to the ground. So spalling is also an issue, and that's also traceable to water entry and the freeze-thaw. Tom, can you explain to people the term freeze-thaw of what we're talking about here? When we keep saying this is a problem, but let's let folks understand what is freeze-thaw when we discuss that issue.
I guess the best way to explain it is if my one hand here is a brick and I have another brick over top of it. And let's say there's an opening between both the bricks at some point where water can collect. And it's going to do it during the day when it's warmer outside. But especially in the winter months, when the water at nighttime and the chimney gets cooler, obviously at some point in time it's going to freeze. And when it freezes, it basically breaks the brick apart from each other. And continuing operation like this will also cause, spalling. Sometimes, depending on the openings within the brickwork itself, will begin to chip and fall away. You'll see it on the outside. In some cases, you'll see it on the inside. And in some cases, depending on the fuel you're burning, you can also create it by the appliance that you have. But we'll just stay at this realm right now. We'll go to condensation later on. But those are issues that it causes just from water being trapped, gets cold, and it freezes, and it breaks the bond that whatever it's adhered to.
Right. And the amazing thing is here, we talk about freeze-thaw cycles. So a freeze-thaw cycle is each time that chimney freezes at night and thaws out in the next day. Now, this may be a surprising fact for you, what I'm getting ready to share with you, because where Tom lives, winters are much more severe in Iowa than they are in North Carolina. Right, Tom?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So what happens in Iowa and Chicago and northern states, Wisconsin, is they freeze and they stay below freezing. So that's one freeze-thaw cycle. Now, in North Carolina, where I live, much milder climate, we will have many more freeze-thaw cycles because we are continuously dropping below freezing, and the next day it thaws back out. And each one of those is a freeze-thaw cycle. And each and every freeze-thaw cycle is going to cause the damage to what we call accelerate. In other words, it gets worse each and every time this happens. So even if you're not in a cold climate, these are problems. So what we've talked about here is how to spot some of the water entry issues, because again, I want to reinforce to you that water is probably the most deteriorating element that your chimney system is going to face. And part of what you've got to do is take the protective steps to protect the chimney. And that involves you may be waterproofing the chimney with proper waterproof repellent materials. You may be needing crowns. You may need a chimney cap. There may be any number of things. But it's kind of like the old Fram filter commercial. It's much cheaper to change the oil filter than it is to rebuild the engine because the oil filter wasn't replaced. So this is the reason why a chimney system and a fireplace and any venting system should have an annual inspection by a qualified agency. And we'll talk about that in a little bit and give you some sources for qualified people to do this inspection for you annually. Maybe it needs to be swept, but Tom, not all chimneys need to be swept every year, but they should be inspected. Are we in agreement on that?
Yeah. We are.
Okay, so moving ahead, we talked about the outside the chimney. Now, Tom, at this point, we're going to walk inside of the house, and now we're presented with the fireplace. And in our discussion right now, this house has one fireplace, and it is an open fireplace, and it is burning wood. And as I walk into the room, I'm going to be assessing what I'm looking at as I'm walking across the room. I've not even sat down on the hearth yet. I'm assessing what I see in front of me. What are the things that Tom Urban is going to be looking at? And then Jerry may add a few things to that. But what's your thought processes of what you're going to see as you walk into the room and you're given this initial cursory inspection visually of what you see?
I guess the first thing I'm going to look at, Jerry, is I'm going to look at the surrounding around the fireplace itself. Actually, I'm going to start probably right where this white area is back in here. And I'm going to look to see if there's any discoloration as it's gotten darkened, where there's smoke leakage happened within the home itself. I'm also going to check, look in the corners around the unit itself. And I'm going to just check to see if there's any discoloration where I can see any soot stains. I'm looking for things that just look out of the abnormal that you would normally not see. Most people have involved with having a leakage from their fireplace sometimes don't even realize it. And a stranger walking in will look in and he'll see points where there's been stud work. You can actually see the stud work where staining has occurred, which has led me to believe that there's been some issues. The next thing I'm going to look at is if they've got doors like this one behind me. If they're operational, I'm going to look at the hearth extension, which is that area right in front of the fireplace, to make sure that there's nothing that's impeding me, one, to work on it, and two, to check out for floor protection right in that area there. I'm going to also, let's see where I'm going to go. I'm going to go from there, the room. Do I have access to it? I can actually work in the area, or I have to remove some furniture. The next thing I'm probably going to do is I'm going to work to see if the glass door is open and closed. And if it has screens, that's the next thing I'm going to check to see is if the screen's open and closed. The other thing, too, I'm going to use is my olfactory, my nose, and I'm going to check to see if there's an odor in the house. If there is an odor in the house, then that leads me to believe there's been some type of an issue also, or that as a homeowner could be also another precursor condition to that you're having water issues inside the chimney. You may not be able to see them, but you might be able to smell them. And that's a real key. And that also can lead to another area of negative pressure, but I'm just going to keep it simple right now. And then after I've gone through and I've opened the doors and I've checked that out, the next thing I want to do is to see whether or not the damper can
open. I want you to hold up there. Right now, we're just in the room. We're going to get into that interior inspection in a minute. But right now, I want to concentrate. What are we looking at? We haven't even sat down on the hearth. We haven't taken a flashlight out. We haven't opened the damper. But again, these are the things that you as a consumer can look for. Now, Tom has talked again. Have you noticed how much we're talking about discoloration? Discoloration is telling us now perhaps we have smoke spillage where it's not going up the chimney, which can be a big issue. We're going to talk about pressure in a little bit and the air that's required to make the fireplace operate. Now, there's another area I'm going to look at, Tom, which is going to be the rear wall of the fireplace. And what I'm looking for here is deterioration on the rear wall of the fireplace. Because if I see deterioration on the rear wall, again, our friendly enemy, water, is probably gotten into that fireback behind the fireplace. That water is now boiling whenever the fire is in use, and that's going to cause deterioration of the rear wall of the fireplace. So again, these are the things that we're looking at as we walk across the room. And if you notice, we're keying on a couple key things that anyone who is a consumer can. Would you agree, Tom, that any consumer could see this that has normal eyesight? You and I both wear glasses, but we could see this without a problem. Would you agree?
This is a situation that most homeowners can just look at their fireplace intently, and they can be able to see that if the brickwork and stuff is in place, or like you said, or you can even have the efflorescence in the firebox. You can have other signs of water damage that's been done inside the chimney. And the other side of the coin too, Jerry, is we can go with overheating application in the firebox, where it's been overheated so badly that you've spoiled the brick, you broke and cracked, and pieces of the fireback itself are beginning to fall apart. So we can do the cold side, which we talked about before, is moisture penetration inside the chimney. And the second part is going to be the overfiring application, or long extended use of the fireplace is just causing the firebox to begin to erode.
Yeah. So these are all the things we're looking at. And like I said, we're sharing a lot of things. Now, what it takes, a lot of times, this is where an expert opinion, as that expert inspector looks at this, he's going to start forming opinions in order to come up with strategies to resolve these issues. That's part of what he's there for. But Tom, the next thing is we're going to spread some drop cloths down. We're going to have some protective layers down for the floor, drop cloths and all that. But then as a technician, you and I are going to have a seat on the fireplace hearth. That's the front of the fireplace, and we're going to sit down. And so now I'm sitting down, and the one tool in my hand is a flashlight. What am I doing now as a chimney sweep? What am I looking at, Tom?
You're going to be looking, I guess, if you first off, I guess you want to like any fireplaces. Like I've got a light on this one right now because they're so dark. It helps you, see things in a much clearer venue. And then and look at points. I'd look in at the fire back itself, the fire sides. I'd also, with my flashlight, I'd look to see where does the fireplace actually connect to the front of the face of the fireplace. I would check there. And then I'd probably, at that stage of the game, I'd also probably see if the grate is in good condition, if they have a grate. And from there, I'd probably go up and I would try to look at the damper area to see. The first thing I like to do, if it is like that, Jerry, I like to find out whether the damper is open or closed. This then lets me know as an inspector that when I've gone through, when I finish it, if it's closed, I'm going to close it. If it's been open, I have that responsibility to tell the customer I've closed it because of, or, be aware I closed it so that before you start your next fire. Or if the customer's there at the time, I can ask them, when I leave, do you want the damper left open or closed? But then I probably would open the damper if it were closed, and I'd begin to inspect the smoke chamber area that's right above the damper and to be sure what I have there as far as the debris and accumulation. And then from there, I'd also go up into the chimney with the fireplace, with the flashlight, and I would look to see what my accumulation level is and the type and kind of creosote or soot that I'm looking at. That also gives me an indication of how they use the fireplace, whether it was, moister wood or slower burns or whatever that causes more. Either I'm looking at the conditions of soot, the chunky kind of creosote, to full glazed creosote, which are, terms that most people, you can see it from the hearth or from the hearth. It's the firebox itself.
Right. Now, go a little further into this. One of the things that Tom talked about is we're looking at these separations. We have the face brick or the facade, whatever we want to call it, in front of it. Some people would call it the profile. That's the brick or the marble or whatever on the wall. So what we're looking for here is to see if there's any separations between that facade, that base, and that firebox. We're also looking directly behind the lintel bar. And the lintel bar is the bar that's at the top of the fireplace that supports the opening. Because right behind there, many times, there will be a gap and a separation that can actually lead all the way into the attic. And this is what we would call a lintel gap, where this could work as a secondary chimney to where smoke, gases, and even heat would be drawn up into that area. Now, as I sit down on the fireplace hearth, I'm going to see how well this damper actually operates. A lot of times, the damper itself may be corroded, rusted, and maybe it doesn't operate properly. It's just sticking or whatever. This could be an issue. Now, Tom also talked about seeing if the damper was open or closed. If the damper is open, that's probably telling us that we have a consumer that really doesn't understand that they've got significant heat loss through this. But then we're going to look up through the damper. And one of the things we're looking for here is the chimney itself clear. Can we see sky, or is there offsets? Because many chimneys are going to have flues that are going to be offset where you can't see them. Now, here's an additional thing that we're looking for. We're looking, when we open the damper, on the other side of the damper, we're looking for little areas that are clean. In other words, we look up there and we got this spot. In this area, we call it the smoke chamber. But I look up there and all of a sudden, I got this little round area, Tom, about this big, right in the corner. Or it may be on the side, or we may find 5 or 10 of these. So you want to tell people what these areas that are clean, what is that telling us if there's a clean area inside the flue or the smoke chamber?
First rule that most chimney professionals have to understand when they're looking at a smoke chamber is that soot does not discriminate where it goes on the surface. It doesn't matter. So if I find an area where there's an opening and I find that this change in color, or I see that there's a possibility of air infiltrating into the chimney, that's usually a key indicator that tells me that air from outside is entering into my smoke chamber. So it's already killing my vacuum or my draft going up the chimney. So again, color is a huge indicator. You know, for the folks that are not educated about fireplaces, anytime that there's soots on something, it's not going to, you know, like, okay, it's going to do this quadrant or it's going to do this quadrant. No, it just covers everything. So when it doesn't, then something prevented it from happening, and that's usually a key indicator.
Right. Now, another thing we're going to look at, we're going to open this damper. And if you open this damper, you're going to find what we call the smoke chamber. And the smoke chamber, the best description I can give you is it's an upside down funnel. Because what it's doing is it's funneling the smoke through a process we call laminar flow up to a smaller flue system. Now, for many, many years, the smoke chamber was not properly addressed in codes and standards. In 1988, the National Fire Protection Association came out in their 211 standards, and we identified how tall a smoke chamber could be and how deep it could be. And it also identified that the sides of the smoke chamber would be smooth. Now, in 2006, they stepped up even more and said that the walls of that smoke chamber should be parged with an insulated refractory mortar. Now that was for to make it smooth and to reflect the heat back in. But if you've got a house that was built prior to 1990, would you be surprised if the chimney sweep would say that the fireplace is not properly parged, Tom?
Yeah, in this day and age, back in the old days when we didn't even have it in '88, we didn't talk about parging that much because we didn't know any difference. And then finally later on, when '88 came on, the codes changed. We realized what parging could do. I guess the key indicator with that also, Jerry, is the fact of the new parging materials that they have. It's just not concrete; is they are a refractory mixture, and also help reduce any heat transfer that goes up into the structure itself. So there's like two things. It insulates the chimney and allows it to stay warmer, which means the gases and draft will go up it. You have a smoother wall to work off of, which means the gases will just like jet up the chimney. And we're also at the same time protecting the home from any overheated applications, which heat transfer from the interior of the chimney to the structure could be minimized.
Correct. Now, other things we're checking on this that the chimney sweep, the chimney service person is going to check for is flue sizing. See, if we have an open fireplace, there's a minimum size for the flue. Now, how do we derive at that? Well, it's a matter of simple math. We take the height of the fireplace and multiply it by the width of the fireplace. So, example, if it was 30 by 32, we would multiply 30 by 32 and come up with a total number of square inches. Now, in the flue area, to meet codes and standards, that flue has got to be at least 1/10 of that fireplace opening. So one thing that your inspector should be looking for is the fireplace flue big enough? Now, so he's going to measure that. So if he had a 12 by 12 inside flue tile, that would give us 144 square inches of draft. So again, we've got to give a minimum of 1/10 when we have a square rectangular lining system, which is going to be predominantly what you're going to find in most of the flue systems in America. Now, if you go on the West Coast, there's some oval flues. There's going to be a little difference in the measurement of that. So, Tom, is this part of it? How important is having a proper flue size for the fireplace to operate properly?
Critical.
Okay.
The key matcher with that, Jerry, is besides the opening of the chimney. Once you've calculated that, then you're going to do your 1/10 rule to see whether or not the liner's critical with that. The other key thing that people tend to forget is that the damper, when it's opened, has to be equal to or greater than the area of the liner itself. So if you've got a center mounted damper, what I'm saying is something that hinges back and forth like this, or versus ones that just come back and just pop back, then you have more area. But calculating that area is critical, because sometimes the chimney can be very close to what you need for it, but you might have a damper system which is actually impeding the flow because it doesn't have the square inch area that's necessary for the gases to flow out. So those are key items that an inspector will have to look at while he's working on your chimney.
Right. Now, also, if it's safe to do so, okay, and I want to clarify that because some people have roofs that actually are probably not safe for someone to get on with today's rulings by different safety boards and all that. But usually, a chimney service person is going to inspect above the roof line. Now, as we inspect above the roof line, this could be done from us getting on the roof itself. There's another way to do this, which is a drone that some people use a drone. If you're familiar with it, it's a small remote controlled flying device that can beam the photos down. There's also something called an iStick, which is an expandable pole that we send a camera up there that we can view from the bottom. And these are now out there that give as much as a 35-foot reach to see what's up there. So what are we checking when we're going on the roof? We're checking for the condition of that brickwork. We're checking for the condition of that crown or that washer splay, which is on top of the chimney, because we commonly find problems with that washer splay where it is cracked and water is entering from there. We're also checking the flashing. We're making sure that it's properly flashed, that it's counter flashed, and it has a cricket. And what a cricket is a diversion hip on the chimney on the upside, so when the water comes down, it spreads around it. And many chimneys do not have crickets. Again, so much of this is made to protect the chimney itself from the elements. So Tom, I've said a couple things about what we're checking above the roof line. We're even checking the stability to make sure this chimney is not leaning or it's not weakened from that point. What else would you be looking for above the roof line?
Initially, you talked about the flashing. You talked about crickets. The next thing probably I would spend a lot of my time is that, like, the number one protector of the chimney is going to be the crown, display, or wash, depending on the terminology that you're using. And obviously, there is a difference between a crown and a wash and display. Wash and display are relatively the same. A crown is something different. I would definitely look to see whether or not there's any freeze-thaw actions that has split it. The crown or the display, raising it up, allowing moisture to come underneath it and attack the chimney. So my key thing that I would be looking at is definitely going to be that area, to be sure that it's free from cracks, free from debris that's causing it to crack and break. The other thing I guess I'm also looking at too is if they have a cap on top of the chimney. See whether or not the cap is in good shape, whether it's screwed down, it's mounted, it's locked in place, it can't move. Again, the same thing, Jerry, you look in the backside for any spalling on the brickwork or any effervescence, where there's been any damage to the brick, themselves. That would all play into what I'm looking inside the roof. And lastly, I guess I'd have to look at to see whether or not it's 3 foot, 10 foot 2 rule would come into play, which literally means that from the roof line up, the chimney has to be 3 foot above the roof line. And that in a situation, then it also has to be 10 foot, 2 foot higher than any 10 foot farther away if it's a high hip or a high hip roof. So those are the other indicators that I'd also look for too, Jerry.
Right. So let's go. That's what we call the 3-2-10 rule in the industry. And this is in codes and standards. But I do want to clarify something here, and that is the proper height of a chimney. And many times we're going to find chimneys that may meet the 3-2-10 rule, but at the same time, they have a performance issue. And when I say a performance issue, they're spilling smoke, because here's the whole thing. The chimney has got to terminate in what we call the zone of negative pressure. The pressure at the top of the chimney has got to be lower than the pressure inside the home where the fireplace is located. So to do that, many times the chimney may actually need to be higher due to the construction of the house, the roof. It could even be because of an adjoining structure next door. It could be because of hills, trees, or any number of things. And this is being able to evaluate the performance of the chimney. And again, if you're seeing spillage, which is going to relate to smoke stains on the front of the fireplace, those type of things, then the height of the chimney is going to come into play. So I want to clarify that. Now, as we also go back, if you'll notice, we've talked about a couple the enemies of proper performance. One is going to be the water and the resultant damage. But there's also a really big key factor in that a wood burning fireplace requires air. And it requires a lot of air. So you'll know in an average home, you could suck the air out of the house anywhere from 2 to 5 times in a 24-hour period just burning a fire. So many newer homes have been weatherized, or existing homes, to where we don't have enough air coming into the house at this point. So as you listened to Tom earlier, one of the things we kept keying on was discoloration from what we call spillage. Because as the fireplace is working, then air should be pulled into the fireplace equally, top to bottom, side to side at all times. But this is going to be an issue. Now, Tom, earlier you talked about using your nose and how that's detecting odors, which is actually a sign of negative pressure that I'm talking about. So you want to go any deeper with the use of your nose as this detection tool we're talking about?
Actually, yeah. The first time I'm looking at is if the chimney is in moist, it'll have a what's the term I'm looking for? An arid, smoky soot stain to
it. It will stink. Let's put it that way. It would be a stinky chimney. It's what we call stinky chimney syndrome. Because here's what happens: if that chimney is pulling air through it, it is pulling your air into your home through a conduit of hazardous waste. I want to make this really clear to you. And what's happening is this creosote is emitting fumes that are carcinogenic. And the word carcinogenic, what does that mean? That is a cancer-causing agent. So if this becomes the air supply for your house, this can make for a very unhealthy house. Very, very unhealthy. So you want to be aware of this. So what would you add to that, Tom?
The other options you have to also look at too if the house seems stuffy. The newer homes today that they're well insulated, and basically they're finding ways to stop the amount of infiltration air coming into the home. So you're caulking doors, you're caulking windows, you're sealing around every entrance into your home. All those things begin to stop the amount of air changes that happen within the house. And with the fireplace constantly trying to want air to go through it, it's always looking for another place for it to leak into it. But the other issues that come with that too, as far as negative air, is everybody's competing for air. So if you have dryers, you have large cooking stoves with multiple fans that that take air out. Dryers, or multiple levels of dryers within the home, fans not in the basements, but in your bathrooms. All these are also trying to pull air out. At some point in time, there's so much air being drawn out of the house that the only place that air can actually easily get into the house is through the fireplace. So it comes down the chimney instead of going up. It's now going down, coming in the house to help supply the amount of air that's necessary to continue to keep the appliances working properly.
Right. So I want to clarify this too, Tom, because we talked about wood burning. But one of the things about consumers in the United States is many of them now are moving to gas, okay? And whenever we had gas, I want to clarify something very clear on here if you're listening to this. The use of gas logs is not a repair method for a defective fireplace or chimney system. And many times you may have someone recommend this. That is a big no-no. So you're aware, if you're going to use gas logs in your fireplace, those gas logs require the same chimney and fireplace system as burning wood. There is no difference in what we're going into. Now, you can find different types of gas products that go into fireplaces. On a future episode of the Fireplace Show, we're going to deal with many of these gas products and what goes on. But Tom, when I make that statement that gas logs are not an answer for a bad chimney or fireplace system, do you agree with that?
Wholeheartedly. In that case, some of the people who put the gas logs and stuff into it, because the amount of water vapor that comes out off of gas when it's burned, it literally deteriorates and just tears the chimney apart. Again, enemy number one is moisture. So once you introduce moisture inside the chimney, especially if you have a fireplace that's on an outside wall where it's constantly being bombarded by cold air, at some point in time it's going to cool everything down. Those gas logs emitting heat into the room, and they're venting up, 20% of that is water vapor, and that water vapor is going to get inside the chimney and leach the living daylights out of it. it literally tears them apart.
Okay, so let's go in. You're a consumer in America, and you're probably wondering right now, what do I look for in a qualified chimney service company to come to my home? My first reference to you is to consult Google reviews. Now, why do I say Google reviews? Because consumers are going to give reviews, and they could be good, they could be bad, for technicians and companies that have properly service them in their home. So that's the number one place I will be looking in order to start my search to find a qualified person in your market area. Find someone who has testimonials and recommendation from other consumers to do the job. Tom, would you agree with my initial recommendation?
Like, totally. That's a good idea.
So you want to start there. Then, are there certifications for chimney sweeps? Yes, there are. Is there licensing? No, there isn't. Chimney sweeping is not a licensed trade. So the only license that your chimney technician is going to have will probably be a local business license, okay? And a local business license does not say that this is a qualified person. But in the area of chimney sweeping and chimney inspection, there are two industry certifications in America today. Now, you may find technicians at companies that are certified by both. One of these is the CCP certification. And the CCP certification stands for the Certified Chimney Professional. And that is a certification mark that is owned by the National Chimney Sweep Guild. And you can research them at ncsg.org. So that's going to be one place that you can search. Also, if you go to that, the NCSG, the National Chimney Sweep Guild, is an association of companies in America in this industry. Both Tom and myself have longtime members of the National Chimney Sweep Guild. We have served volunteer capacities. We've been on boards. In fact, I am a past president of that. I served for 6 years on the board of directors as president of the National Chimney Sweep Guild. So we have the CCP certification that you can research at ncsg.org. The other is the CSI certification. The CSI stands for the Chimney Safety Institute of America, who also has a certification program where they put people through a certification testing system. Now, I'm an instructor for classes that people take to prepare for these particular classes. So you'll know my beginning class for a beginning technician is a 16-hour class in order to prepare them, in my opinion, not that they are subject matter experts, but rather to begin the trade. So that's 16 hours of training that we provide through our education platform. So you can also check through if they are CSIA certified, and you can research that at csia.org. Tom, what else would you say as far as how people can search to find a technician that can do a good job for them?
Probably both those organizations, offer training that's necessary for being within this trade. I've also we serve the United States and the world in some cases. We've had some masonry contractors that have shown some great skills in this area. Home inspectors are beginning to understand this realm. And we also work with a lot of forensic engineers who also, have run across difficulties or there's someone has incurred a loss. And so that's where they use our equipment. So, but on a day-to-day basis, Jerry, probably those folks through both the certifying organizations would be probably the best bet for the homeowner.
Right. So these are the things I'm going to recommend to you. And Tom, as a consumer, and Tom, if you disagree with that, feel free to disagree with what I'm getting ready to say. I believe that when you hire a company to come out, that part of their service to you should be that they take a camera to inspect the interior of the chimney system. From this camera system, they're going to be able to take documentation, which is photos of the problems. They should then be able to explain what is wrong in a discussion with you in a terms that you can understand. I'm also going to recommend that you deal with a company that you feel you can trust, that you can build a relationship that's willing to answer your questions. Those are my recommendations. Tom, would you disagree with what I just said, or would you offer anything else?
I would offer a little bit more with it, Jerry. There
Sure.
are companies out there whose willingness basically is get in your door and sell you something. There are companies that basically will that I think just easy. It's easy just to say. I think you're looking for a company that they're going to come in and do an overall inspection, and those inspection practices are already configured in most of the certification programs. So there's level 1, level 2, and level 3, and you're going to be looking for a company who's going to use those standards to go through and do an inspection on your company. I think the most important part of Chimney Sweep you can do is educate you on the capacities of what your appliance can and can't do, and what it should be doing. And all those things we put together in an overall objective report. And this way here, when the report can be done verbally, the report can be done on paper, or it can be done as an email or whatever. It gives you a totally idea about what the general condition of the appliance is at the time that they did that inspection. That's a good company. They're going to go through and they're going to check these things for you. They're going to be able to give you a report, give you some summary of what you have, what you don't have. When you put this together, then you have the information as a homeowner to be able to sit down and go, okay, what's the next best course of action for us to get our chimney up into an operational ready condition? What do we have to do to make it work as it's supposed to? And as you can say, I didn't say the word safe because no fireplace or chimney or appliance out there is really safe. Remember, you're bringing fire in the middle of your home. So the degree of the severity is also depends on the protection that's created. So the fire is contained in the fireplace, the fire or the appliance, and it's not inside the chimney. So those are key factors. And so to a homeowner, I would say you're looking for the company who's going to give you an overall objective condition report. And then if there are some deficiencies that need to be met, you can discuss those individually as you go through it.
Right. So here's the whole thing. We are in the middle of October, and this is one of the hard facts. We are recommending you get your chimney and your fireplace checked and inspected before you use it on an annual basis. And one of the things is right now, you may be facing a backlog of the companies that are severely backlogged at this time, because American consumers historically wait until the last minute to do everything. So I want to warn you, when you try to contract with someone to do this, you need to anticipate it may be a little while before they can get to you. If you call up somebody today and tell them that you're going to be home tomorrow, I have a feeling they're going to disappoint you. I don't think they're going to be able to get there tomorrow. I just don't think it's going to happen unless maybe they had a cancellation right before you called and, hey, something opened up tomorrow. But this is part of your normal home maintenance. I mean, Tom, when I say people should be looking at getting the services done in the spring and the summer months, is that good advice?
That's very good advice, Jerry, because just the backlog, the work that you run across, it just really, I think probably most people right now are running 4 to 8 weeks behind. So it's really, really tough time of the year. So if you have, if you have the chance to have this done in the spring and summer, it's by far the easiest time to get it done. In most cases, most people are out like a week or two. Sometimes they're ready the next day. So there's a little bit more availability of time during that period versus right now when everybody's under crunch.
Yeah. So anyway, we hope that this has been very helpful to you today. Again, my guest today has been a longtime friend of mine, Tom Urban, located in Fairfield, Iowa. He manufactures a product called ChimScan cameras. He's been instructing the industry for many, many years. In fact, Tom, I don't even think that you or I could even come up right now with how many seminars we've taught in our careers. Could you come up with that number right now? Because I know I couldn't.
I can't remember it anymore. I do know that I started in 1983. That I do know.
That was your first seminar. Believe it or not, that was the same year that I presented my first seminar, which was in Nashville, Tennessee, for a company by the name of August West in 1983. So you and I we each have been teaching now for, that sounds like 38 years to me, Tom, as I look at the ERP. So that's a lot of courses. We used to travel around the United States together. We did a course combined called the D&D class, which was a diagnosis and documentation. but I think we've trained a lot of chimney sweeps in our time, and we've come up with a lot of standards. So appreciate you joining us very much today. My name is Jerry Isenhour, and this is the Fireplace Show. This is sponsored by CVC Success Group, and our mission in doing this show is not to benefit us, because neither Tom nor myself provide services for consumers. We do this as a way of giving you education to help you in maintaining your home and having a safe fireplace, a safe chimney system. And there'll be additional shows coming out. You can reach out to me if you have any questions, or Tom. You can see our email addresses on the screen right now. And with that, we're going to wish you a great week. We want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to join the both of us today. It's always an honor, it's a pleasure, and it's a privilege to be able to share our ideas, our concepts with you. And we hope this time has been of value for you. And with that, we'll see you next time on a